Two-man show today, Wheels and AGR with you. Christian Jack and our entire OneSoccer crew is in the city of Montreal as Canada about to play Australia on Friday night. And KJ did a 10 and 10 questions in 10 minutes with head coach Jesse Marsch. What stood out to you the most about what Marsch had to say, AGR?
Yeah, I mean, lots picked up on in short time. So it was good. Just if anyone hasn't seen it, Jesse Marsch gives a bit of an update on Moyes Bombito. That's obviously was a big topic this week. How long would his recovery like? He compared it to Tajon Buchanan's, which was something I'd wondered if there was some similarities there that maybe it could help the player in his recovery. Of course, he also gave some updates for this camp. James Pantemis dealing with a bit of concussion protocol. So Luka Gavran has been called in as a precautionary measure for now. We'll see if Pantemis makes it back. Luke DeFougerolles dealing with a bit of a small knock, but one that doesn't sound like it's too serious. But otherwise, it was, just interesting to hear his takes on some players. Like he spoke about Kamal Miller and what it means to have him back in the group. Because obviously he's a popular player in the group, but Marsch also kind of hinted that he wants a bit more out of the player, in camps with club, etc. He also spoke about Jonathan David, because obviously he's a very big and important player for Marsch, but hasn't maybe been that same player for Igor Tudor and Juventus quite yet. So lots of different topics to kind of poke at, but definitely some good revelations on some of the players in this squad and how he feels they could be used in this camp and going forward.
Let's chip away at some of those topics, okay? And specifically, the whole notion that there'll be limited rotation between the players that we saw in the last window and what it may mean for this window. But at the same time, with DeFougerolles carrying something a little bit, that was a little bit disconcerting to me. And especially when the topic of Kyle Larin came about, we're saying that he requires more. At the same time, also saying that Promise David's on good form. There's only so many positions to go around. So perhaps a little bit of mixed messaging. What do you make of some of what he had to say and potentially what that may mean for some players potentially getting a look and other players potentially maybe remaining on the outside looking in?
Yeah, I mean, the way I interpret it is, especially his comments last window when he mentioned there'd be limited rotation, is that you're playing from the front, so to speak. If you're in a team, if you're in 11, the 11 has a good performance. So the way I read it is, I expect as many as the guys who started against Wales and Romania to play, right? So I think that team is pretty settled. But I think what he's hinting at is, okay, if Ateni Oluwaseyi starts and he doesn't, perform, Promise David's right there for him. That Kyle Larin's right there for him, that he wants these guys there and ready, but that he kind of has guys already penciled into positions, maybe not penned in. So I think that opens up some battles that, okay, yeah, if at center back he name dropped Joel Waterman as one of his guys he's really liked with how he's played for Chicago, and maybe Luke DeFougerolles is not able to play, I think that's a sign that we could see some Joel Waterman and Derek Cornelius at the back, and if they perform, that they're going to keep their spot. I think that's what Jesse Marsch kind of wants to do, is that he's creating an environment where these players, once they get into starting roles, they don't have to feel like it's going to be rotation just to rotate. If you hold your spot, if you do well, you can keep it. So I guess the first lineup will be really telling. So I'd expect it to be similar to what he put out in Swansea.
I was really surprised by how encouraged he was, or how positive he was about the injury to Moyes Bombito. You mentioned it. They used Tajon Buchanan as kind of the comparison, but we didn't really see Tajon back to full strength until last summer. That was just about a year after he originally broke his leg. Do you think he's just putting on a brave face at this point? Because I'm still of the mindset that Canada will probably have to try out some different players in that position to inevitably come to an option that you'd be comfortable with if Bombito can't go. Like, the fact that he's saying his personality, he's a future captain. I get trying to put a brave face on a negative situation, but it seemed maybe a little bit too, I'm not sure if over the top is the right way of putting it, but maybe looking at things a little bit too much as with the glass half full at this point, rather than dealing with the stark reality that a really key player faces a significant uphill climb.
Yeah, and I think what's tough with all these injuries is you just don't know how guys are going to recover, because some guys, you have a 3-4 month layoff and it really messes with them because maybe they're not used to having that sort of time off. Maybe their recovery, that process is never easy because it's such a mental grind having to get your body back to where it was. Plus, like in some cases, I think with Tajon Buchanan, what was unique was with his injury, he missed a very important preseason. And I think he was always playing catch up because of that, because he got injured at Copa America. And you wonder with Moise Bombito, because he already missed a good chunk of preseason with, a similar-ish injury with the stress fracture, that already he was maybe playing a bit of catch up already with Nice. And that now when he comes back, that's why it's so tough to gauge Alphonso Davies, Alistair Johnson, Moise Bombito, who are all dealing with major injuries. Liam Miller just seeing it now, because it's one thing to be cleared to play and to be back. From there, you have to get match fitness. You have to get match sharpness. You have to get form. And for some guys, they come back from injuries, it clicks right away and you forget they were ever injured. But for some, like Buchanan, you're right, it took time. So I'm curious with Bombito. Maybe Marsch feels that with the way Bombito plays, sometimes it is a little easier for a defender to come back than an attacker, because the attacker, it's so rhythm based, it's so form, it's movements, it's how you feel. Whereas defenders, it can be a bit different because you can just play maybe a bit simple your first few games back, get your confidence. But it is still a very optimistic timeline. If he returns in March, to think he'll be back at his best by June, that's going to be a quick 3-month turnaround.
Yeah, two other players that find themselves on the periphery, and it feels like maybe a little bit misguided to be focusing on that rather than the players that are going to be playing. We'll get to that in a moment. But you mentioned the comments pertaining to Kamal Miller, that he's a really good guy and he fits around the group, obviously, but I just don't see him as being a fit for Jesse Marsch. There's been no evidence of it. Even his comments that he made to KJ, it seems like, okay, he's around, but he's not a solution. What does that mean for that position? And at the same time, the Kyle Larin comments that he rates the player, but he needs to see better form out of them. And this is the player that scored once in 20 for Canada and really has been on the outside looking in and seems to be maybe the third choice. And that doesn't even include Jonathan David, but the third choice behind Oluwaseyi and Promise David as well. So is there anything that these players can do, especially considering there's going to be limited rotation, to prove Jesse Marsch otherwise, just in terms of their assessment and their fit in the team, other than being good guys with history with this group that you want to keep them around potentially if there's a 26-man squad next summer?
Yeah, Kamal Miller's an interesting one because, like you mentioned, Marsch hasn't really found a place for him in this team. And even when Miller has had decent bouts of form with Portland, he hasn't really looked at him unless there's been injuries, I guess.
It's style of play. Like that's what it is for me, AGR. He's a good player. No one's going to deny that.
100%.
But like the aggressiveness, the pressing, Miller's a very good distributor of the ball. But with this Canada team, even Marsch has talked about it. Same thing goes for Joel Moderman, by the way. Really good distributor of the ball. But Marsch feels like at times that the team is better off when they don't have the ball, which maybe doesn't play into the strengths of either one of those two players.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to compare like Miller and Waterman. Like Miller he's never really looked comfortable in a back four, like as a CB. And I think you can see it with Portland. I mean, I saw him live a few weeks ago. He scored a heck of a goal at BC Place, but he was playing left back-ish, like sometimes playing as a center back in possession. And I think even Phil Neville grapples sometimes where he plays him in the middle of a four, but then he plays him back at fullback. Like he just doesn't have a clear place in a four. With Joel Waterman, I think with him, his midfield experience helps him because he's used to pressing right up against forwards the way Jesse Marsch sometimes wants his center backs to do. Yes, Waterman doesn't maybe have the same straight line speed as a Bombito, as a Defougerol, or even a Cornelius, but at least he has that comfort of stepping the way Cornelius does. But with Kamal Miller, he doesn't maybe have that same comfort stepping. And as we know, he doesn't have the straight line speed where he was really good. With Canada was just playing on the outside of that three, cutting out passing lanes, making those slide tackles. But there isn't as much of a role for that because this defending is so front-footed. It's so cutting out danger before it happens, right? That's the key to playing such a high line. So with Miller, I think maybe this is just a prove it camp because the injuries have fallen in his favor. Can he take a moment and do it? Because if not, the way Marsch was kind of talking, you wonder that if a young center back were to emerge. And I mean, I know he has his eye on Jamie Knight-Labelle, who he wants to see playing more and getting rhythm in England. Maybe that's kind of his call, but he's just giving Miller one last look at, okay, it's a domestic camp. We may as well have a look at you. I know Knight-Labelle in League Two, they play through the international break sometimes. Maybe just let him get minutes. But if not, he obviously trusts him. And then with Kyle Larin, I think similar thing. I think with Larin, though, there's more room for him to stay in the squad because with forwards, there's value of a 10, 15-minute guy because you can bring that maybe that's the difference. Late in a World Cup game, you bring him on and he can make a difference, like you did for Feyenoord this weekend, getting the late assist, Marsch reference. But the forward group is competitive. When you see Theo Bair score a hat-trick this past weekend and he's not even included in this camp, you do wonder up front, okay, the seat's hot. You want guys eventually scoring and producing for Canada. And still, about 18 months into the Marsch tenure, it's Jonathan David's done that, and the rest are still kind of figuring it out.
I still wouldn't rule out, especially if you have a weakened center back pairing, add a different type of profiled player to play that Jonathan David role. I still think that Ismail Kone can play there, and perhaps you need a third natural midfielder to play if the reality sets in that you're going to be playing without Moise Bombito. Like therein is the knock-on effect for me. And then you could have Jonathan David leading the line and then another player playing that role. Is that something that crosses your mind? I know that you have key interest on what the midfield may look like, who might be the preferred options. Obviously, we focus on it too. But at this point, if there's no Bombito, I the very least think that it's something that Marsch needs to consider, perhaps playing a third and then augmenting his team based upon that. What do you think about that? I think Colombia might be a good game to try that based upon the quality of opponent that you're playing in that game. How are you looking at the midfield, AGR? And what are your points of interest here?
Yeah, well, I think I've written for a while now that one of the underlying factors in the striker battle is that if no one wins it, there are a lot of midfielders that would like to get in the team, so that if Oluwaseyi, if Larin, if Promise David don't score, well, that opens the door. Because right now the midfield battle for me heading into this camp, it's not talked about. It's better than ever. Like it really is, because you've got Stefan Eustáquio. Yeah, he's not playing as much for Porto, but we've seen no matter what form he's in, he really shines when he plays for Canada. But then all of a sudden you realize the battle to play alongside him is kind of ridiculous. Like Marsch name dropped Mathieu Chouanière, who's been in fantastic form for the red hot LAFC. But then Ismail Kone is probably in the best form of his career right now with Sassuolo, the way he's stepped up and found his feet there. Nathan Saliba has been also fantastic for Anderlecht. Him and Kone were both great together against Wales. All of a sudden, I'm doing the math. If there's one midfield spot and there's three guys, you can't cut them into thirds and put them all together into one player. You do only have room for...
Not yet in 2025. But
maybe I'm ahead of my time. But the idea of... Because the thing is with Marsch, he has that door. Like he used it against Uruguay. He used it in some other friendlies where he's tried three in midfield, and every time they've done it, they've looked good. So I think at a certain point, if the strikers aren't producing for him, you have to wonder what it would look like if he had Eustáquio, Saliba, and Kone together, especially when you watch Kone and Saliba with their clubs, the way they get forward, the way they drive into the box, feed their teammates. I think a Jonathan David, an Ali Ahmed, a Tajon Buchanan could benefit from that. So it's a hammer I would like to see wielded at some point, because I think it could offer a bit something different.
I completely agree with your assessment there. Before we wrap, there was also a comment at the end of the 10 and 10 with KJ pertaining to Jonathan David and Jesse Marsch going out of his way to make some remarks pointed at Juventus about how the club and Igor Tudor, their manager, is using Jonathan David and what to expect, basically saying, give him more opportunity and he'll thrive. I think we know that Jonathan David is a special player. I personally think that Juventus understand what they have in the player as well. I think it's the last thing that Juventus need to hear. In fairness, and Marsch has spoken out about Canadian fans and their reaction. Sometimes Marsch just can't help himself. I just think that that's the last thing that Juventus would want to hear at this point, especially when they have two other very good strikers in competition. And might I add, a lot of games to play, top level games in the Champions League, and playing as one of the front runners in Serie A as well. What do you make of that remark? For me, it's just like, is it really necessary? It's still very early in the season, or does this foreshadow any potential reservation or maybe acknowledgement that Jonathan David's going to be in tough battling for minutes at a very good team in a legendary club? Like let's be honest, a very big club like Juventus.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like you laugh at it, but I did read it tongue in cheek. Like I think because the way he was talking about Jonathan David, like the way he's like, for me is really important. In our team, he's super, like, I think he was kind of joking, like, hey, there is a blueprint here of how I'm using him. Maybe if Juventus, pulled it out, I wouldn't be mad at that. But I think that's ultimately why we've said Jonathan David's at that club, because these are the challenges you go of what happens when you go through a 6-game slump. Fans are not happy at you. You want to be scoring goals. But what I will say, where I actually kind of agree with Marsch, is that Juventus hasn't shown a whole lot of flexibility with their striker situation, because they have 3 good ones. And what's nice with a guy like Jonathan David is that he can play as a second striker. Why haven't we seen like a David and a Vlahovic? Why haven't we seen a David and Openda? Because with all 3 of them being so different, I have found it strange that Tudor's kind of just rotated one of each of them up front, because I think that's also hurt the team a bit, because some games you have Openda and he stretches. Some games you have Vlahovic, he's more of a true 9. And then some games you have David who kind of drops. I also wonder if that lack of consistency up front is hurting the team as a whole. And maybe Marsch is kind of hinting that, hey, maybe you try Vlahovic up front with David underneath him, like he would do with Canada, and maybe there's a solution there. So
when I look at Juventus and I've watched them a bunch this year, it's just, I think that they're much more shaky at the back. I think that this is it's not a traditional Juventus side. And that's why I think that Tudor is more concerned about how that defensive shape's going to hold up. I think he knows that he has very good players out wide and players to use through the middle as well, that he's more concerned about what that defensive shape will look like. And we know that David can track back and put in that effort, but that's not where he's at his best for me. I mean, that's what I think. For the national team, it's something different. I just think that was something that Marsch wanted to get off his chest. And I don't think that that's something that Juventus is going to be like, well, why is the Canadian national team head coach like hinting, nudge, nudge, telling us what to do with our player? I just don't think that Marsch can help himself at some points, which is a good thing. Backing your players, it's a good thing. I don't think it was meant to be funny. I don't think that he's Dave Chappelle here. So yeah, good stuff, AGR. We'll look forward to seeing what this team looks like, and we'll continue to follow across our OneSoccer platforms across the week in the build up to Canada and Australia.